Yes, everybody, welcome back to the IrishHotspur. And in this video, we are going to be giving our reactions to Hugo Lloris's quotes that have come out in his recent book. And it is the international break, so we are looking for things to chat about that we can catch up on that have happened around some Spurs news while the games were coming thick and fast. So we're going to give our reactions to what he had to say with Daniel Levy and as well as Antonio Conte. We thought those were kind of the spiciest of the quotes, or at least the ones that we would kind of take out, and dissect a little bit further. So if you can for us, everybody, give us your reactions, give us your comments, maybe on what Hugo Lloris has had to say in his recent book, and let us know what you think. But everyone as well, smash that like button and also consider becoming a member because there will be some members only videos put out for you guys as well. But Dave did have some things to say about a certain engraved watch that he was given by Daniel Levy. So let's take a look at what he had to say here. He said 4 days before the final, Daniel Levy called us all together to announce that with the support of a sponsor, we could each receive a luxury aviator watch from the club. At first, we were excited to see the elegant boxes. Then we opened them and discovered that he had the back of each timepiece engraved with the player's name and Champions League finalist 2019. Finalist, he wrote. Who does such a thing at a moment like this? I still haven't got over it, and I'm not alone. If we'd won, he wouldn't have even asked for the watches back to have winner engraved instead. I've considerable respect and esteem for the man and all he has done for the club as chairman. I got to know him, but there are things he is simply just not sensitive to. As magnificent as the watch is, I have never worn it. Would have preferred there to be nothing on it. With an engraving like that, Levy couldn't have been surprised if we had been 1-0 down after a couple of minutes. So it was written. Dave, I mean, what are your thoughts on Hugo? Who's kind of, is he bringing up a good point with Levy here? Is he kind of exposing himself, of something? That's what I personally think, but I'll let you go first.
Do you know what, Jack? I think it's exposing the whole club in general, to be quite frank. I think, look, first of all, it's good and it's important to get an insight from people that's been in these situations on what's going on behind the scenes. But when you look at these quotes, when you look at the Conte quotes that are going to come, it really highlights how much of a loser mentality we have from top to bottom, and that actually we keep sacking the only guy that comes into the football club with that winning mentality, which is actually quite ironic. But look, in terms of Daniel Levy, it just sums up how much he just does not get the football aspect or the elite aspect or the psychology aspect to the sport. Look, like he said, he's great with the finances. Hugo Lloris went on to say how well he's run the club and stuff. And to be fair, I don't think anyone really has that sort of argument. But us Spurs fans, we're interested in the football side. We couldn't give a cahoots about the other side. And to engrave a watch with finalists on it 4 days out from a final shows how content he is just to be on that stage without actually having the hunger or the desire or offering the incentives for these players to go and get over the line and go and win it and say, I want that in my trophy cabinet. It shows a complete lack of just understanding from Daniel Levy to all aspects of the football inside, because when you put finalist on it, psychologically, when the players see that, it's like, there's no pressure on us to go and win this. He's just happy to be here. Grand, happy days. Which it just sums up, that Daniel Levy now needs to change his mentality at the top. He has to come out to the fan base and to players. He has to prove that he wants to win. He has to set that culture in around Tottenham. We've spoke about him many times with how long he allows players to stay at Tottenham without actually quite doing it on the football pitch or doing anything to try and help us go and win trophies, which sets that sort of precedent, that culture in around Tottenham. And he has to change that culture himself at the top for everybody else to fall in line below it. When it comes to Hugo Lloris, okay, thank you for coming out and, just basically confirming what everybody all knows when it comes to Daniel Levy. But you've also exposed yourself within this. Because when we go on further to the Conte quotes, he also makes a lot of excuses for not winning. But what I also have to add to Hugo Lloris is a good captain has a firm grip on that dressing room. If he already knew that Daniel Levy has a losing culture or a losing mentality,
Exactly.
all he simply has to do from 2 weeks out is go to Daniel Levy and say, look, I don't want any sponsorships in this dressing room. I don't want any interference from anybody that's not a part of the coaching team, the management team, or the players. Let us focus on the final. He didn't do that.
Exactly.
Like he said, he was excited to see the watch. It was only the fact that it was engraved that let him down. And I don't understand giving out about receiving stuff from sponsorships because it's well known in football from the 90s when lots of sponsorships started flooding in. you hear England players talk about all the time. When they go to the room on camp, it's full of stuff from sponsorships. They're constantly getting stuff from sponsorships. They're now negotiating with clubs to start getting money out of the sponsorship deals the clubs are generating and stuff like that as well. So I don't take that as from Hugo Lloris. And if you lost the Champions League final because you received a watch 4 days out, then you also have a weak mentality.
No, completely agree with that point that you made towards the end there. And that was the only thing I could really add to it was, yes, Daniel Levy, like you said, I think is we already knew doesn't really have that winning like mentality. I agree with Hugo. He's not sensitive to these sort of things. He doesn't really get it. He's not necessarily a sports guy in the Graham
Yeah,
Souness words. He's not a proper football man or anything like that, Daniel Levy at all. And so I think we kind of weren't surprised to find out that yes, he probably would do something, Dave, that would be a bit tone deaf or something that would be kind of a bit just sort of out of place, maybe not really the right setting, not really the right sort of time and place to do something like that. So we're not really surprised that Daniel Levy would do sort of that type of thing. It's just so funny
yeah,
to me that Hugo even tries to mention this as sort of an excuse basically for why they did lose that final, why they did have this feeling around the club that no one really cared. We made it to the final. And then if you feel like that sort of, I don't know, rejected towards that, or you really feel that aggrieved by that or something like that, why couldn't you have done something about it in the first place while you were there for
yeah.
10 plus years practically? And also as well, like the guy had plenty of opportunity, like you said, weeks, months before the final to try to change that sort of mentality, to try to be the guy that can step in and tell the players that, this really does mean something to a lot of us. This really should be the game that you put everything into. You have to be putting in your best ever performance, type of thing in the
Mm,
Champions League final. And I don't know, I'm not really getting that from Hugo. He doesn't seem to even indicate that he did very much out of his own work to try to change that mentality. He just sort of complains about that mentality. Yet he actually had an ability to change that. He was the club captain. He's someone who had been there a long time already. He gets and understands the club, or at least he'd like to think that he would. And he knows it enough to feel like there's a losing mentality. So I don't know. It's
mm,
just, to me, it's interesting that he somehow uses this situation with Daniel Levy as the reason he lost the final, as the reason they lost the final, when they actually could have done something about that
yeah.
mentality. To be honest, Daniel Levy, for me, isn't really the necessarily the bad guy in this. He's actually just the idiot, in this, as per usual. But let's go over to the Antonio Conte quotes, Dave, because you think those also kind of maybe
Well,
sort of drip feed into what we've been saying about Hugo being also guilty of this kind of
mm.
loser like mentality in the team.
No, just before you go into the Conte quotes, could you actually just read that last paragraph? Because it actually sets up the next part quite perfectly, actually, there about the post match reception. Because this guy went to bed, Jack, as in his quotes here, thinking, does anybody at this club have a winning mentality? Then he goes on to talk about how much Conte done to win, how much he was tormented and driven to win, and then he threw him under a bus. So, sets it up perfectly.
No, it does. And that's what I sort of meant as well is like, him, Harry Kane, and Pochettino are acting like, the way he writes it as if they're all acting smug, at the end of the final, being like, oh, we're the only ones that seem to care. And it's just like, well, why didn't you do something about it then, weeks before
Mm.
the final? If you're the ones that did care, just seems like he's just taking no responsibility. But then he goes on to say these things about Antonio Conte. He's saying, I found Conte to be quite a character, driven by victory, which gave him energy, but he found it very hard to control his frustration when we started drawing, let alone losing games, because his inner torment had to get out. And if he was tormented, then everyone had to share that torment too. And things could get very complicated very fast. He told me once that in any given week, his happiness only lasted an hour just after winning, and that was it. In training, he oversaw everything, organizing tactical sessions with 10 outfield players against one goalie, but it was hard for the creative players to find their places in his restrictive gameplay. During matches, Conte was as extreme and eruptive as he appeared, garnering respect and fear. Such a strong personality pushed wingers to prefer to play on the opposite side of the dugout. I've never forgotten our first defeat under a 2-1 loss to Mura and Slovenia in the Conference League. Even though I wasn't playing, I was still entitled to his screams and his reproaches, just like everyone else. In squad meetings, we would spend at least 30 minutes a day doing video analysis, not forgetting the interminable preparation camps at our training center. After the defeat in Maribor and Slovenia, he had screamed, Mura, Mura, who is Mura? We've lost to Mura. I still can hear him now. If a player needed a little love, he'd better not knock on Conte's door. For Conte, trust is earned in training. He has no filter. He's sincere and he's honest. He's a manager who lives only by results. Whereas from a player's perspective, a performance is important too. So many things to dissect from this, Dave. But I mean, there's that little bit towards the end there that maybe we could touch on. But what do you make of, Hugo Lloris and what he had to say with an Antonio Conte, especially kind of maybe towards the beginning there, where he's basically saying that, Conte's, kind of drive for winning, I guess, had played an impact on everybody else. When he would lose, he would get so upset that it kind of brought everybody else down. And his drive and obsession with winning, led to really intense tactical sessions that maybe to Hugo Lloris perhaps came off a bit boring, and then also mixed with, really hard, physical labor and work that they would do on the side. Just sounds like Hugo didn't have a great time under Antonio Conte.
Well, I mean, it's ironic because he spoke about, going to bed after Champions League final thinking,
Wanting to win.
am I the only one at this club that wants to win? Does the club really want to win? So they bring in a guy that's won where he's been, knows how to win. He brings in the standards that he set everywhere else, that other players have been able to follow to go on to win things. And it was too intense for them, which shows to me, what chance do we have to win if they can't follow literally a blueprint that has worked everywhere else to win? That's the intensity. They brought in a guy to be able to show you how to do it, and you don't want to follow it. You find it too intense. You find it too boring, And what annoys me is the guy, Conte, left with the narrative that, by the time he left, he wasn't interested at Tottenham. He's taking all these holidays. He was just turning up, for 1 or 2 days during the week with a training session and then flying out to Italy, flying back in for the game and putting a team out there. When Hugo Lloris is telling us this guy is putting in video analysis, work on the training pitch, organising everything, setting all the standards for us to win, and we can't hack it. And that's exactly what that tells me. So, Hugo Lloris, this is where he doesn't cover himself in glory. You, as club captain, you're the one that's put in charge to be able to get everybody else to follow the manager's instructions, to follow. He basically gave up on Conte, which is why everybody else did. And we wonder why we talk about having a weak dressing room. We wonder why we have the manager turnover we do. You're sort of seeing the same thing now. Postecoglou's clueless, this, that, and the other. But in reality, we're being told these guys are working hard on the training pitch. You've even had Spurs players come out about Postecoglou and the work he does on the training pitch and all. So they're clearly drilling them. But for whatever reason, because of the culture set from the top, they know they can hide behind the manager, let him take the fall. And Daniel Levy will just give them another 4-year contract and away you go. So it's just a loser mentality from top to bottom. But it really drives me mad. Then he goes on about Ennis Moore and he goes deeper into some of that where he basically says he called me into a team meeting about the Ennis Moore defeat and I wasn't even in the team. I mean, I'm sorry, Jack, but what an idiotic statement from a club fucking captain. As club captain, you of course are going to be dragged into that meeting because it's up to you to drive the standards in the dressing room. He's of course, he moans about being pulled out on being on the end of some of Conte's rants and stuff like that. But Jack, I've heard people of the class of 91, other dressing rooms of other great captains, where they said the manager knew he could rely to call me out a bollocking, even if I was playing well. Because if he bollocked me, everyone else would stand up. So Hugo Lloris can't take that. So he's another excuse merchant and another reason why we didn't win anything. Because all I'm hearing over these two things is he's trying to blame other people and he's taking no accountability.
The way I see it as well is that he's kind of just done a few things that are quite shocking, really. He's blamed Antonio Conte for having too much, I guess, of an intense winning-like mentality, where Antonio Conte takes losing and drawing games very seriously and in fact maybe takes it a little too personally and a little too emotional. We've heard this before with other managers. I think like Diego Simeone or something, like doesn't even speak to anyone for like a whole 3 hours or something, after games. He just gets that intense and that riled up when they end up losing games. But I guess Hugo, is now contradicting himself because he did say earlier that he felt like he was the only one that cared about winning. But then when you bring a guy in that seems to also care about winning, apparently it's not the mentality that Hugo's okay with or something like that. So I'm a little confused. I guess it's a little too much now, I guess for Hugo, whereas before it was too little. He wants it just right, just a perfect medium rare to serve him. And then also as well, though, he brings up things like about, having to do really intense tactical sessions and then also have to do intense physical training afterwards. I'm like, well, I'm sorry. I think you're a professional goalkeeper and a professional player at a very high level. That is how it is going to be sometimes. It's not always going to be the fun manager, every single time that's just going to let you, get off early, go see the kids, go see the wife, at 2 p.m., 1 p.m., you get let off. I'm sorry that you have to do a 30-minute tactical training session. I mean, 30 minutes. You can't spare 30 extra minutes, in your day. Hugo Lloris. It just seems again like a guy that was complaining about a lack of winning mentality. Apparently, an extra 30 minutes of tactical training session is just too much for him at the end of the day. But then he also went on to say, like you said, Dave, with the whole like having to be a part of the conversations, with the NS Mira defeat, feeling like he should be spared, doesn't even need to be there. If you're the club captain, you should almost have to be there for everything. Like, if there's
Yeah,
like a new meeting with the tea ladies or something like
yeah.
that, you should probably be there. If they're trying to set a new menu for the mess hall or something like that, might as well be there. You're probably parking the golf carts, with the guys, after the training sessions. You're the first one in, last one out. You're the guy that just has to be there for it all. You're the one that faces everything. And yet he's complaining about having to face, the eruptions of Conte and everything. It just doesn't really get it. He's just a guy that seems to like to excuse himself, whenever it's most convenient for him. And also, I love the fact that he brings up that Antonio Conte only really, gave people opportunities and only really trusted people if they worked hard in training and if they also, basically just did the hard yards for him in games based off results. And it's just like, isn't that how it should be? Like, shouldn't you be trusted by training? Shouldn't you be trusted by like results, like all these sort of things? It's just a lot of the stuff that Hugo does end up complaining about. It's just, again, kind of bizarre for someone that just earlier criticized the club for lack of a winning mentality. I just don't get it. I guess too much of a winning mentality in Conte's case for him.
What he's complaining about is what's necessary to go and win trophies and to be successful. That's my problem overall, Jack. If you people think Man City players aren't sitting there going through video analysis, doing tactical training and all that sort of jazz on the training pitch, which is why they're so good, of course they are. In fact, Man City probably do more analytics than everybody. They overanalyze. That's why they have every minute part of their game down to a fine art. That's why they win. We're complaining about wanting to do that. What chance have us fans got? And this is why I always say to people, and this is where we're at the point now with Ange Postecoglou. We can't always keep blaming the manager for absolutely everything. Sometimes it is on the players. Sometimes they do make excuses for not wanting to win. Instead of looking at themselves in the mirror, they'd rather blame someone else. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but we just simply at Tottenham Hotspur do not want to do what's necessary to go and win trophies. Simple as that. So at some point, you've got to
Yep.
put the manager in place, leave him in there, and eventually build a squad that would be dragged to that standard.
Well, everybody let us know. Welcome to disagree with us. As always, we have no
More than
problem with
welcome.
that in the comments
But be
below.
polite.
If you feel like, Hugo, I'm fairly judging him here, maybe taking the quotes out of context. I don't think we are. I think we're actually trying to really dig deep into them, trying to read maybe between the lines with what he has to say. But let us know, everybody. Smash that like button as well, please. Like I said, consider becoming a member. Some members only videos will be given out to you guys. And also, just yesterday on the panel show, we did the members only section where we answer your guys' questions at the end of the show. We'll see you next time. Come on, you Spurs. Big Ange, we trust. See you next time.